Hey.
That is. All right, Trails Collective audience, if any of you are tuning in with us out there, thank you. This is Ian with the Trails Collective coming at you live this week, picking up for Ellie as she heads back to school. And I myself am pretty stoked to be connecting with the 4 individuals who are behind the Mahoosuc Ridge to River Endurance or Trail Challenge. I think I muddied that name a little bit, but we'll get there. This was an event that just looked really spectacular to me in terms of the scenic value, some good climbing, some exposures, and it just seemed to sink well into the larger trail and ultra calendar. So I had mentioned to the crew before we went live here that if not this year, I will hope to get up to this event next year. But the larger, I guess, bigger picture here is for this group, or from my vantage point as a race director, I think this is a unique paradigm of 4 individuals that are coming together from land trust entities and such to put on a trail race. So I'm going to let each one of you in whatever order here. I guess we'll start just Kirk, you're up on top. So just for simplicity's sake, I'm going to start Kirk. So if you could each introduce your entities just a bit, talk about what you do, and then we'll get into the union of the 4 of you.
Sure. Thank you, Ian. I'm Kirk Siegel, the Executive Director of Mahoosuc Land Trust. Great to be here with my friends and colleagues, Gabe and Noah and Sarah. We're a land trust, and we've been around for about 30 years. We've conserved mountaintop summits, waterfalls where 10,000 people a year visit, canoe landings, ecologically sensitive areas, riverfront lands, lakefront, mountaintops. But this whole event, enough about me and Mahoosuc Land Trust, this event came about because we saw the potential to bring together 3 different organizations with, quite different actually missions and activities, and do something to pull the community together and just have a really fun event.
Ian, are you on mute?
So I'll wrap back to you maybe individually after you introduce yourselves, just because Kirk, I'll maybe follow up there and see where you're coming at it as an individual. But let's keep cycling through the entities here, and then maybe I'll circle back with some probes. So Gabe, you're on my screen next. Why don't you and Sarah take it away?
Okay, great. Thanks for having us, Ian, and the Trails Collective. This is really fun to kind of talk about what we're doing here in our region with the Ridge to River Challenge. But my name is Gabe Perkins. I'm executive director of an organization called Inland Woods and Trails. We were formerly known as Mahoosuc Pathways. We changed our name last fall. And I've been with the organization since it started, which this year is our 10th anniversary. And broadly, we have a mission to create economic prosperity by connecting trails through the building, maintenance, and advocacy of an interconnected trail network in the area. Sarah?
I'm Sarah Weafer. I'm the Events and Marketing Director at Inland Woods and Trails. I've been with them for about 4 years now, and we also manage our Nordic ski center in the winter, where we have winter activities. And we have events that in a normal year we would put on all year round, both winter and summer and fall events. And we typically have a lot of volunteer days, people to come and work on the trails, Nordic ski races, weekly trail running races. And then Mahoosuc Ridge to the River Challenge is kind of a new one for us, although it's now entering into its 3rd year already somehow. So
it's getting on, it's growing up.
Yep.
And then you have it. So is that, as I'm getting a visual of your entity, so do you have a base facility where you have a Nordic center and the trails around? Like, is there a central facility proper?
Well, there kind of is. We have a couple of locations. Our main offices are right on Main Street in Bethel. And then in the winter, we use a space that's based out of the Bethel Inn Resort, which is a historic resort right in the village of Bethel. And from there, we have trails for Nordic skiing, fat biking, and snowshoeing in the winter. And we also have mountain bike and trail running trails in the summer. So it's all kind of headquartered there. But we also have other properties with mountain bike trails and hiking trails.
Cool. And so the mission of your entity or organization is really, you said, Gabe, if I captured it right in the moment, to cultivate economic activity around woods and trails. I mean, that's the angle. It's not necessarily while you dovetail with other conservation entities, you're really an economic engine, so to speak.
Yeah, we're focused on creating a year-round outdoor recreation-based economy, or doing what we can to help spurn that on in our area, which has a deep history of summer tourism. That's a much more older. That started 100 years ago to now in the last 40 years. Through winter and downhill skiing at Sunday River and Mount Abram, and we're trying to bridge the gap there to make the year-round economy robust through outdoor recreation all year round.
Yeah, and so here in where I'm at in the Finger Lakes of New York, for I think it was maybe like 4 or 5 years, I sat on a county strategic tourism and planning board, and specifically with a focus on recreation, and felt like the slant of at least the board locally here was more focused on using the dollars we had access to for probably more arts within the community to try to bring people in. From my filter and vantage point, I felt like there was much more opportunity in recreation as a destination and what's actually bringing people in. And I would guess, it sounds like, Bethel, I would imagine, has some equal arts opportunities up there as well, but it would seem like recreation would be the prime kind of tourist driver, I would think.
Yeah, it all happened before we were all born, right? Mm-hmm. There was a deep history of people coming up to Bethel from the city to escape the choking fumes of all the coal furnaces, and they would come up here to sort of retreat and relax. And that became this driver really in the summer. And only in the last 40 years or so, it became more of a winter destination. There's still a hardy summer population, but we're trying to reflect, kind of the history of the place. And that's kind of what made us go originally. Yeah. We're trying to fill in the edges.
Yeah, that's great. In some senses, that just sounds, obviously, the sound and the reality on the ground can be very different. But for those of us, and I imagine those who are tuning in, very much recreation or athletics or whatever, outdoor immersion is a very big piece of our lives. And so to think of your entity with Inland Woods and Trails, it's just like, that's like a dream job. Like I basically, can use the resources that we have around us, whether the land that the Mahoosuc Land Trust is buying up, the river frontage and the water quality that NOAA will get to you is securing. But let's just bring people in and let's use this. And so, what's your economic? Where's your funding coming from?
Yep, we were heavily sort of foundation and philanthropic based for years, living hand to mouth through grants, foundation grants, which kind of got us up off the ground. But now it's a mix of grants, revenue from our trail center in the winter at the Bethel Inn, and then donations from individuals. So it's a sort of a third now, where it used to be like 95% grants, and now we've kind of settled out a little bit. Yeah.
All right, I'm going to come back to that in just a second, that thought, but just Noah, let's weave you in. Let's let you introduce yourself and your entity.
Awesome. Thanks for having us on, Ian. I'm from the River Fund Maine. My name is Noah, and I'm the executive director here. Our organization is relatively new. We were incorporated in 2018. Prior to that, we were actually a private foundation Really it's just sort of a derivative of Sunday River Resort, which is really sort of the landmark ski resort here in the greater Bethel community. In 2018, we split and became our own 501c3. I was part of the board when it was a private foundation, and then I moved over to the River Fund in 2018, and then actually just took over as executive director this past November. And what we're really aiming to do is create a bright economic future for our community with a high focus on education and kind of harnessing the recreational assets of our community. And we are still currently the premier philanthropic partner for Sunday River Resort, which is where we get our name, the River Fund. And we're just super excited to be, collaborating on this project, bringing the assets that Sunday River has to offer, and, collaborating with everybody in town.
So very much aligned there then. So a very similar or parallels in organizations. It's just Gabe and Sarah, you're working through kind of a Bethel entity, and then Noah, you're based at kind of a Sunday River focus. Is that?
I think it's accurate in somewhat of a sense. I think it's sort of bridging, the mountain and the village together, harnessing the assets of the second homeowners and the visiting populations, and finding ways. I think a lot of the sustainable tourism work that our community has done, you'll see a lot of parallels to that, looking at what we're trying to do here, and how can we, really be great stewards here, and capitalize on those opportunities.
And then, so that just sounds wonderful. And obviously there's always the stress and where your funding is going to come from, particularly when the economy fluxes like this. Here in Tompkins County, for our similar body, we're drawing our funding source from hotel tax, a room tax. And so that obviously took a hit this past year. But that room tax is what funds our basically tourism branch. And it's great because obviously it should dovetail with one another. The more people that you can bring in, the more funding that comes from it. And so it seems to work pretty well. And it also sets it outside of the constant hope that you'll get a larger grant or philanthropic donation the following year.
Definitely. No. So the nature of our funding is a little bit different from what you are experiencing, but we've definitely seen a hit due to COVID-19. And just, our largest partner and benefactor is a resort. So obviously tourism and hospitality has been extremely affected during the pandemic that's ongoing. But we have multiple streams of revenue, and some grant work, event revenue, great philanthropic partners as well. But, powering through as best we can.
Yeah. And then Kirk, for your entity, just glancing at the map right before we started here, it looks like the Mahoosuc, is it a state forest, or what's the actual public tract of land there?
Yeah. So this region is interesting. We're a two-state organization in New Hampshire and Maine, the Mahoosuc region. So surrounding 20 or so towns on both sides of the New Hampshire-Maine border, where the most rugged section of the Appalachian Trail comes through.
It's a bold area. Shots fired there. You're going to get some people that are like, "Whoa, what's he talking about? I got rocks in my set." Yeah. All right, but keep going. Yeah.
Right. No, we're really proud of. We as folks in the Mahoosuc region are very proud of the ruggedness of the Mahoosucs and of the section of the Appalachian Trail. So this is for us. This is like, bragging rights. But this event that we're here to talk about tonight has some really rugged terrain too, to kind of represent that Mahoosuc mountain ruggedness. But in answer to your question, there's a huge public land. The Appalachian Trail is here. The White Mountain National Forest has a large area in our region. State land, private conservation land. We can serve about 9,000 acres now of conservation land that we either own as preserves, or that we hold conservation easements on that are permanent tools to protect land from being developed. And like the other organizations, we have diverse funding sources, but we work hard to maintain a membership base. We have about 500 members. and many of whom have been with us for years, but we're always looking for new members. And in this time of the pandemic, we can all point to numerous trails that have been undergoing huge increases in use.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think one thing, and Noah mentioned sustainable tourism, and bringing people's attention to the demands for these awesome places. We're blessed with this amazing resource around us, but getting people to understand the demands on that and the cost for inland woods and trails to maintain trails, or for us to maintain trails on our lands. And so this event kind of, and maybe I'm getting ahead of your questions, but this event helps raise attention to these resources and these special places, and the need to take care of them and love them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it was wild, I think probably then for all of us to be witnessing the boom in foot traffic out on the trails. At least I know for us trail runners, getting out into whatever our preferred trail destinations over the years, we get used to we've got this to ourselves, and suddenly, wow, it's wild in terms of people everywhere, and the backup at the lots, and the photos of just how much trash ends up being left behind, and it's just been wild this past year. Yeah,
I mean, yeah, it's been wild. I mean, we have a partner in Maine called Maine Trail Finder,
mm-hmm.
which is sort of an online searchable website for any type of primarily non-motorized trails in Maine. And they had an 88% increase in site views in 2020. And the busiest day ever was on April 25th, right? Which is, there was snow on the ground in April. And their busiest day ever, and that site's been around just as long as we have, for 10 years, was in April. And so, yeah, there was this.
And it'll be interesting to see what happens with that, right? I mean, so how do you plan for that? Like, do you then plan for the resources or upgrades or staffing or whatever based on those trends for next year? Or do you plan for that and it drops back off? But let me Grace, one of the viewers with a comment or a question. Grace's question is, do you find a greater need for money or for volunteers for maintaining public lands?
Wow, I'll jump in on that one. It's a really hard question because both are so critical, Grace. And we're able now for the first time to actually hire a trail caretaker. We call it a land steward that we're hiring for now. But the last thing we want to do is give up our incredible membership volunteer efforts that are just critical. And I know they are for the other organizations here on the show tonight too. So yeah, the answer is yes.
Dude, that's not an answer. No, that's great. Grace is a fellow trail runner as well. She's in Pennsylvania, central Pennsylvania. And at least I know for me as a trail runner, even though I've tried here and there to set up maybe trail weekends, and I have an event company called Red Newt Racing, and for our events, we'll make donations back to, actually, for instance, the Finger Lakes Land Trust here it's a critical connection between two parts of my course here. One of my courses here in Ithaca, so make a donation to pass through each year as well. But I think that there was an article a few years ago that came out in Outside magazine, I think it was, that caused quite a bit of angst or kind of stir in the community, where it's basically, I think it was coming from a mountain biker, maybe if I remember right, that wrote it, where it's basically trail runners are leeches. And I kind of feel that way. I mean, there's a lot of trail runners out there that definitely took offense to it, as I think they should. At least for myself, I go through these areas or trusts, or for instance, one of the larger entities in our area is the New York, New Jersey Trail Conference. And they have an amazing array or army of volunteers, and they're ones out there doing such heavy lifting on these trails for development and maintenance. And, and maybe I'm out there cutting back some brush or, something like that, and passing by these like huge redevelopment projects. And I definitely know that as an individual, I'm not carrying my weight there, even though I try. and I guess that's a tougher, I guess, it's kind of a dead end kind of statement, but just for those of us out there, I know for all of us in the trail space, very much respect the work that all of you are doing. But I think that is a question for those of us who don't participate enough is, do we need to get out there more, donate money? And Kirk, you're right? We need to do both there. And then on the Mahoosuc, so do you think that at one point it was just originally named just like Mahoo and then it stopped there? And you said it's such a technical terrain up there, Kirk, that it was just like, and people kept going up there and be like, this trail sucks. And so eventually it just kind of became the Mahoosuc. I mean, do you think that that's kind of where that came from?
That is a really viable theory. Yeah, we'll have to do some fact checking on that, but yeah, I'd go with that.
All right. Yeah.
No fact checking necessary, Kirk. Just run with it. That's what
Uh-huh.
So, and I think going back to the, runners might take advantage of these resources. I think what we found is just the opposite. And Sarah maybe has the most direct experience with the volunteers on this event, but the volunteer core group was really a bunch of us who were rabid trail runners who were like, this is great getting to plan this because we get to go out in the weekend and and run the potential routes and then the event itself. I think a lot of the volunteers, many of them are runners or outdoors people.
Mm-hmm. Do you get as big of a mountain biking population up there as well? It seems like the mountain biking crew, in order to have access to some of these areas, put in a ton of work on their kind of the NIMBY trails or not NIMBY. That's sorry, just the wrong acronym there. It's not the acronym we were going for. Put in
the landowner.
But I know in a lot of areas, right, they're not necessarily welcome in these higher, I guess, regulated like areas or whatever. But you have just as, I imagine, with a larger recreation scene, you're kind of catering to a little bit for everybody, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, and Sarah, please jump in. But that was kind of the reason we were founded.
Mm-hmm.
Was there again? I keep talking about that sort of blank space in the economy, and that blank space was mountain bike trails.
Mm-hmm.
The local private school at Gould, who's a partner of ours, they had some trails, but they were sort of off the beaten path. They're not really publicized. We at Inland Woods and Trails were like, we're going to start to make these and develop these across a landscape.
Mm-hmm.
And Sarah, who rides a lot, I mean, she's seen the increase in use. And I don't know how many miles of trails we have now, 10 or 12 or something.
About 10. Yep.
Uh-huh. And then, so Sarah, your job is basically just put on parties. You're just like the party director.
Isn't that a great job?
It is a fantastic job.
Who wouldn't want that?
I don't know. Yeah. And so you're charged. So the Mahoosuc is a trail run, but are you putting on ski events and mountain bike or other races as well?
Yeah, we sure are.
Yeah.
Yep. Mahoosuc Ridge to the River Challenge kind of came about, 2.5 years ago. And prior to that, we were hosting Nordic ski races, Nordic ski events through NENSA, which is the New England Nordic Ski Association. We collaborate with them on a lot of events. And we do a weekly trail running race, which we didn't do this last summer, but normally we would.
Mm-hmm.
And, the volunteer trail work days, I think of those as events in and of themselves. And that is a perfect example, and in a way to, talk to get to Grace's point about, volunteers and how important they are to what we do, and having those days where people can come in and feel like they're contributing to the trails.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but the Ridge to the River Challenge was sort of, the idea behind it was for something a little bit bigger in scale than what we had been doing. So.
Oh yeah, so let's go in that direction. And with the Mahoosuc Ridge to River Challenge, so how did that come about? It would seem like, well, actually, you guys can lead in, but I would think that just again looking at the map that it's a dovetail. So it's based at Sunday River. So then, Noah, you'd for sure kind of be in on that, but then it bridges off into these other trails and maybe part of the Mahoosuc Land Trust, or what's kind of what brings all three of you together with a kind of stake in a specific event?
I'm going to let Gabe actually tell the story because this is about Noah's predecessor and how it got started.
Thank you, Sarah. That's good. Yeah, that's right. I've been thinking about this over the course of our time here, and it started with a phone call when I was in the airport in Steamboat about to fly home, and Noah's predecessor just calls me out of the blue and he's like, "Hey, let's have a trail running race. Let's do it this year." And I'm kind of fresh off vacation, about to head home. And I was about to come home to a mega, for us, Nordic ski race with 250 athletes. That we were hosting the U16 regional championships, racers from 8 states. It was like it was happening 3 days after this phone call was taking place. And he was like, "Yeah," he was like, we should just do it this year. And I said, "Well, if I bring it up like this week or next week, I'm pretty sure it's going to be stonewalled by Sarah, who works with me on events, because we're kind of in the ringer right now." And he was like, "Well, come on, we'll just think about it. Let's just try to make it happen." And so I waited a month, maybe, and we kind of kicked it into gear. I think we all were excited about it, but kind of had to drag ourselves into the idea to plan a new event in 5 months, knowing that we had just taxed in some ways our volunteer base for this big event in the middle of March. And but like every good idea, everybody takes it on as their own, and we kind of started to run with it. And
and so it's not like you're just like, let's just do maybe a 5K in downtown Bethel or around Sunday River's parking lots. It's so very much fitting to, hey, let's go up in their hills and let's do something cool.
Let's make it as tough as possible. Let's just really beat them into the ground. We knew there were a couple other races in the region, but I think it was either Kirk or Sarah really early on were like, how much vertical gain and drop this is? Like, this is going to be insane. And we were like, good. At that point we were all in. This was like June, and we were like, yeah, good, harder, better.
Yeah. And so, all right. So yeah, tell me about that. How's the describe the events and the course? Like, what kind of gain is in there? What's the course like? And yeah, paint that picture.
Well, I think Kirk, we have a core team that we work with year round for this event, and most of them are avid trail runners. So it's pretty easy to say to someone like Kirk, "Hey, can you go for a run this weekend and just check things out?" And usually you don't have to twist his arm very hard to do that. So Kirk and a couple of other volunteers, Will and Brian, to whom we're very grateful because they've put in so much time for this event, spent a few weekends exploring both the Sunday River property and the Mahoosuc Land Trust property and Inland Woods and Trails community forest properties to see what kind of trail and roads we could weave together to make a really challenging course. And looking at a start and finish, would they be the same area? Would it be a point to point? Kind of just mulling over what we wanted the course to look like, and then talking about the different categories. So we started with the 10K and a half marathon year one. Last year we added a marathon, and every year it seems very tempting to just keep adding on a longer distance. And so we're already thinking, ultra marathon, can we get a 100-miler in there? But Kirk, you can probably speak more to, what you were looking for when you were up on the peaks. And it was great to get some pictures and, be trying to think of, all right, well, if you went this way and then this way, could we sneak in another 500 feet vertical?
Right, because I think we ended up with 4,000 vertical feet in our half marathon. Is that right, Sarah?
I think, like 3,300, 3,400. Yep.
Between 3,000 and 4,000 feet for the half. Well, first I'll say we wanted to make sure that the 10K was an option that families and kids could do. because all our organizations, really want to make sure that youth have, healthy activities to take part in. But then our minds, like Sarah says, we got looking at the mountain and needed a name. So ridge to the river, the Sunday River ski area is 8 peaks with a beautiful ridge. And people in the area might know of, the 4,000 footers like Old Spec and, these sort of classic peaks in the White Mountains, Mount Washington or in Maine. But Sunday River ski area actually has a really beautiful ridgetop, exposed summits, rocky, where you have views of all the mountains all around. So we want to take advantage of that, just like incredible visuals of the ridge. And then it was going to end at the river, Sunday River. So that's the name, Ridge to the River. But along the way, we realized not only there's this spectacular ridge line that runs for several miles over all the peaks, but there are just really good trails that Sunday River has created over the years for its guests, and we were able to tie together this course, using a lot of existing trails, some downhill ski trails, but mostly nice hiking trails, and it's the runner scouts. You didn't have to twist their arms too hard to go out and say, okay, we got to get 13.1 miles here. We only came up with 12.9. Well, I guess we better go run it again tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. And at least for me, that's probably one of my favorite things with events over the years is just course scouting and design. And each year for a lot of my races, I've tweaked the courses just because I find a new viewpoint. I'm like, I want to run the course over to that, I don't know, view shed or whatever. And so I know some courses are really bent on keeping it the same year over year, but that's just not where I come in. So it sounds like with Sunday River and the amount of access to trails that you have, and that's pretty ideal. And so the course right now, it's like a single loop is a half marathon. Is that the format?
It's changed over the years. The first year, it was a point to point. So starting on the land trust property, running through the community forest that's owned and managed by Inland Woods and Trails, and then on to all the peaks at Sunday River. The 10K had a shortened loop, ended up at one of the base lodges at Sunday River, and the half marathon did all the peaks and also ended up at the same finish area. But due to COVID last year, we, after talking it over with the mountain, decided it would be safest and best for everyone if we had the same start and finish area right at Sunday River. And so It ended up being the 10K had, sort of a similar, we incorporated that into the overall marathon course. So the 10K kind of was cut off about halfway through. The half marathon was, as you said, kind of like, it was sort of a figure 8 actually.
Okay.
So just for a little more pain, you climb and go over the ridge line, then come down and have to climb back up to a couple of other peaks, and then come back down. And the marathoners got to do it twice. So it actually made it, it was nice to have everything kind of in one spot, the start and finish together. It makes logistically, it's a little bit easier to manage. Sure. So it ended up being a good thing. And we're planning for the same course for this coming year because of COVID. It's sort of, it worked last fall. So let's stick with it, do it again.
Cool. And that would be going forward. So even after this year, you just like that configuration and...
We like the configuration, but we're open, as the Mahoosuc Land Trust and Inland Woods and Trails are acquiring more land and building more trails. I think we're always looking for ways to incorporate those properties and look at, all right, if we want to do a 50-miler, where would that start? And that definitely would change the course for sure.
Mm-hmm. And that grand vision that you mentioned in passing was that 100-mile vision, that bigger. So when you think about that, I mean, it's just like a fun thought, right? To just think of the expanses and how beautiful that would be. Like, what's that vision? Would that be a looped course? Or if you can do that, you've obviously got the acreage and access to it, and working from with the three entities, a lot of goodwill in terms of the eco space. So what is whether it happens or not, whether it's years down the line, something like 100 Mile, like what's the vision there? Would that be a point to point, or would that be loops, or what would that look like?
We will be looking at both of them. One idea would be to connect the two mountains, two ski resorts in our area, which is Mount Abram, which is a small family mountain, south on Route 26 to Sunday River. So there was a recent land acquisition by the Conservation Fund, which kind of helps connect all these properties from that mountain to mountain, basically. And one fun idea would be start at Mount Abram, end at Sunday River, and incorporate all holdings of Land Trust and Inland Woods and Trails kind of together. That's one thought, but Kirk and Gabe, you can talk to other ideas.
There's just a lot of looking at maps and Google Earth and kind of like,
it's fun, right? To vision that,
yeah, it's like, yeah. To Sarah's point, it's a fun job.
yeah.
So we'll get there eventually.
Yeah. Consolidating the event at the ski resort, there are a lot of advantages. We're able to take advantage of Sunday River's generosity of providing, infrastructure at the base lodge, sound systems, just a great place for handling a large crowd, because we hope to grow the event from the 200 we had the first year to into the higher hundreds towards 1,000. Which seems pretty realistic. The other thing is that the ski patrol at Sunday River has been available both of these years. So when you're above tree line, weather can change. So having that, safety support system is really good. And the mountain is interesting enough that, the mountain itself is like we were saying, rugged and scenic and pretty breathtaking in a lot of spots. So we're in a good place now, and it can only get better.
I would just say that I think, that's all very, very true. But really, it's the connections that Noah and his organization bring to, and the access to Sunday River. I mean, it's not like we live 100 miles apart. We all live 5 miles from each other here, but or Noah in I's case, 200 yards or something. But the way that Noah's organization and that long relationship that they've cultivated through their foundation work, and now as the River Fund is their own nonprofit, there's just a lot of like, I'll just go check on ski patrol. I'll go check on the events director, like pass them in the hall. Which is, it's sort of informal event organizing, but it's really powerful because Sunday River Resort just does events, left and right all day long. And, Noah's just able to kind of pluck that kind of stuff and have that access. It's just amazing. So Noah,
Well, I appreciate that, Gabe. And it's funny, too, because my roommate is actually the events coordinator. So we have those meetings at the dinner table every night when the ask needs to be made. So that's quite generous of you. But it's Sunday River has been incredibly generous in sharing the resources. Kirk did a great job of outlining everything that they provide. And, the bathrooms are a huge piece of that too. You don't realize how much you need one until you're done with a race like that. But it's, they've been an incredible partner on this event, and look forward to working with them moving forward too.
What's the vertical gain of Sunday River from base to whatever would be your top summit?
I believe there's 2,800 feet of vertical. Is that correct? Yeah, total vertical. Yeah, I believe it's 2,800.
Yeah.
If you go from the very tippity top of Jordan to the very base of Whitecap, that'll take you, I believe, 2,800.
We're wide, not tall.
Yeah.
We can take advantage of.
We're talking about the resort, you and I, Gabe. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Is that what this is? Oh, shoot.
And that's awesome. So one of the events that I put on is the Whiteface Sky Races, and
cool.
Gosh, they've been wonderful to work with as a mountain. But there's the larger entity, which is the Olympic Regional Development Authority, that oversees and operates the mountain, and that's not always easy to have reliable communications there. And so that makes it difficult. So to have, just the network that you have as a team to make this happen, that is kind of a dream team operating there, which just one RD coming at it, which has some upsides to it, but wow, not nearly as efficient as your crew can pull off here.
It's three organizations working together, because any one of us couldn't necessarily do this. We have to work together. It's a small town. We have big ideas and we have a big ski area, so we're used to a lot of people. Like that just kind of embodies the spirit. It's like, well, we can, let's bring Kirk in, let's bring us in, and Noah, and like just make it kind of sing from there.
And to your point of the width or the breadth of the terrain, that's critical too. I chose Whiteface specifically just because it has the highest vertical gain of any of the resorts east of the Rockies, I believe. And so we've got in some of our races more vertical gain per mile than any race in the country, which has been fun, but we're very much limited to a slice because right outside of that heavy use boundary, like it's untouchable in the Adirondacks. My initial course vision and design went up over Whiteface proper and down the neighboring ridge, and it was absolutely amazing. But yeah, we can't use that. And so it's great, but we're confined to this slice, whereas it sounds like you all have access to this amazing amount of terrain.
Yeah, it's the work that Kirk and his organization have put in for years. It was the first thing that Sarah ever asked me about, like 5 or 6 years ago. She's like, "Hey, I want to help you. Let's do a long distance trail running race." And we looked at going into the national forest and the wilderness areas or the AT, and those all have these sort of bureaucratic checks that make it a no-go.
Yeah.
And so we went from this sort of narrow focus to now having all this access to all this land. Work, several years later kind of brings it to bear. But yeah, this has been Sarah's idea for a long time, so I knew we had a chance.
And so that as one of those restrictions there too. That's a good point with, I guess, some of the restrictions that are in place, right? So, all right. So is the Mahoosuc, is it national forest or national forest is separate from, like, how's that? What are the entities right there that you're drawing on?
Well, this particular course is this year was essentially all on Sunday River's land. In the prior year, as Sarah mentioned, it went over Inland Woods and Trails, Bethel Community Forest land, and went over Mahoosuc Land Trust land. In the greater region, it's a real patchwork of state, federal, town forests, land trust properties, Appalachian Trail. It's a real mix. And as the conservation movement, organizations like mine and Inland Woods and Trails have picked up steam and conserved more lands and created more access, we now have more opportunities to get creative in events like this and other events. It's a really exciting time, and part of that whole transition Gabe was talking about, the transition from essentially a wood products based economy to one that's much more reliant on tourism. So we're part of a societal economic transformation that's happening too. So that's exciting to feel like we're playing a leadership role in some of those positive changes.
Yeah. And so for the larger one of the, I'm trying to remember what was the, I'm spacing just in the moment. What was the main race that happened for years that just switched locations, I think, into New Hampshire last year?
The Pineland race.
Pineland, yeah.
Yep. Kirk and I have both done that race, and that's been, Kirk, how many years was that race held?
I think the last time it ran was 2 years ago.
And then they moved it to Gunstock in New Hampshire. I don't know how it went.
Yeah, and I didn't look either to see whether they pulled off, but I was really, I don't know what went into it in terms of the decision to move, but when you talk about the vision of being able to get your event up into, say, 200, 500, 1,000, whatever that be, it seems like that was one of those that had pretty high numbers up in Maine, which I was surprised that they made a venue change, because it seems like it was a really successful event with some deep roots there.
It was a I don't know the details, but it was an awesome event and very, very popular. So yeah, I just don't know what the inside story there.
Yeah.
And we had hoped had we not had the pandemic this year, I think we were hoping to go to 400 in 2020. As it turned out, we were closer, I think, to 200 the second year, just like the first year. But we feel like we're on a trajectory, and I guess it's sort of our job to keep it sustainable. It's a great event in itself. We want it to be a charity event to help to provide the benefits that go to all of us. We're charities after all, and we serve the public. And as Grace asked and her alluded to in her question, we do need financial support to achieve our missions.
And so, all right. So the revenue from the event, is it just split between the organizations? Is that the kind of the funding stream, so to speak? Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. I mean, pretty simple. Like that was, we all put in varying levels of work or have varying levels of expertise, and we split it because ultimately it's going to go to locally based community projects that help kids' education or conservation efforts or health and wellness. And just split it. It's all going to the greater good in the area. So
totally. Yeah. And that's great. And it seems like that. And so the vision is to, do you think there's anything that is specifically lacking that you really want to build into the next couple of years, such as we envision 50 Mile in 2 years, because that maybe will bring in another 200 people, or even if you keep it the same, you think you'll be able to get to those thresholds? Sarah, the party director, what do you think? Do you need to add more distances, or you think there's enough demand where you can stick with the shorter stuff, so to speak?
I would hope there's enough demand to stick with what we have, but at the same time, there seems to be a lot of interest in the longer distances, just in terms of people challenging themselves. We're seeing a lot of runners out there who aren't necessarily by nature serious runners, but having something as a challenge or as a goal is really popular right now. So putting a 30K or a 50K or something like that in there would be exciting. And I just love the idea of a 100-miler, in part because there's only one other race of that length in Maine, and that's the Riverlands 100. And they do a great job, but there is a demand for that. I think there's interest in it, and knowing the kind of terrain that we have, the really, just sort of awe-inspiring terrain, I think it would be an easy draw.
Yeah. Do you think you can get an extended course without needing to cross the AT? Because that is one of those hitches, right?
Oh yeah, no, we can definitely do that. Yeah.
That's great. Yep.
Yeah. And like everybody has already said, working with Sunday River is sort of, just a dream organization to work with, having access to everything that they offer. And that makes it really easy for us to then say, okay, well, if we want to do a 100-miler, where can we start it? Where can we end it? And how do we still incorporate all that Sunday River has to offer? And with their huge parking lots and, just their facilities are pretty amazing. So.
Yeah, that's huge. And that's one of the biggest, as we all know, biggest limiters in terms of event caps or size is just that staging. Right. And it's wonderful to have an entity such as Sunday River to make that possible. What did you do on the point-to-point? Did you bus to another starting point? We did.
Yeah, we started right at the Mahoosuc Land Trust. They have a facility and then a big field across the road. And so we bused people from Sunday River because there's so much parking there. And that was how it worked in year one, and it worked well. Although we did have to use a section of paved road to get to the community forest land. And ideally we don't have any pavement in there at all. But with COVID, we decided not to do the busing. We want to take that out of there for sure. So that's one of the reasons we kept it all on Sunday River property.
Yeah. Yeah. And when I looked at some of the event photos last year, was it Joe? Was Joe your photographer out there?
Yeah, for sure.
it seemed like he was posted up in one kind of signature venue where some runners were coming. I should pull it up and share my screen here for the viewers, but it seems like people were coming up into one rock slab area, some trees on either side, and he was kind of posted up there. And so but it sounds like on the course, you're getting a ridge line enough where you're getting views just throughout. It's not like that was like the one awe-inspiring part of the course. Your runners in this course are just all over.
Right. And Joe actually brought 2 other photographers with him. So, it was sort of a team approach to that. So he had, sort of stationed in 3 areas, which meant that we got a lot of incredible shots. And then they all kind of moved around a little bit on their way down and got some. So we really had, I don't know, probably 5 or 6 different locations for shooting, which was fantastic. And all of them are gorgeous,
Uh-huh. So. Sweet. Well, what, anything you guys want to get into from your organizations or other things you want to talk about for the event? While I got you, that you want to get out there before we think about closing it out?
Well, I will say registration is open and the early bird specials end on the 31st. So for those people who are, hedging their bets, or not sure if they're going to sign up, the best prices are right now and coming to a close next week. So there's that. And I don't know, we're really excited to put on this event again. We feel like we kind of, for the most part, figured out a pretty good system for COVID safety measures, and with those in place, that was a huge challenge. And so I think with those already in place, it'll make this year's event even easier. And hopefully we'll be, a little bit out of the woods with that, maybe be able to add, a beer tent and some food trucks, or, something, have some kind of celebration at the end. That was one thing that's, it's a bummer for all the events that are taking place right now, is the no post parties.
Sure.
So,
yeah. And the event is, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I just want to say, sorry.
I also want to jump in right now.
It's all you, Gabe. It's all you.
Boys, don't make me mute you.
Sure. Sorry.
The first year we did have you got a beer ticket if you were of age, and it was the Brewers Festival at Sunday River. So it was a great vibe there. And of course, last year we missed that a lot. But Sarah did an awesome job at making the start safe, and everybody had their lane. We had wave starts with 10 or whatever in a wave to make sure people were spaced out, and people hung out in the parking lots. They weren't all clustered around the start finish, and the mood was good. People were really happy with the event, I'd have to say.
Yeah, stoked, right? I mean, the events that could pull it off last year at all, I mean, people were craving that community and getting out. And then, so just for you to be able to pull it off, I think a lot of people had more leniency on some, I think, the modifications, but everyone just seemed so grateful just to be out there.
I think that's exactly the sentiment. I mean, just people came up to me over and over and over again and said, just thank you for doing this, and they were so willing to do anything we asked. You want us to wear a mask for the first, 10 minutes, fine. We're good. We're good with whatever, just so they could run. So it was, in large part, thanks to the participants for making it work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Gabe and Noah, you guys wanted to jump in there.
I don't want to. I was being silly.
So no, the only thing I wanted to add in here is, we touched a little bit on the philanthropy. And I think the only change that we have this year is we are going to have a fundraising element. So all of our organizations work on the development of our community in different aspects. And new this year, there's an opt-in fundraising option. So in addition to your registration fee, if you feel so inclined, you can fundraise on the behalf of the 3 organizations. We strongly encourage, during the pandemic or not, like Kirk said, we're working on behalf of the community, and it's important for the success of this event that it continues to happen. So I think that's an important new element this year that we certainly hope that many folks choose to participate in. And continue to do their part for, using the trail system.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. It sounded fantastic before, but to get a little bit more details here, I'm really looking forward to getting up there and hopefully can bring at least a car full of friends up there as well when we're able to do such things again. But I'm stoked that you were able to pull it off last year. So the precedent's there. So it should go this year. So the event date is first weekend of September? Or?
It's September 25th, Saturday.
September 25th.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And I think that was my schedule hang up. I'm trying to resurrect one of my prior races, which is a 50 and 100 mile called the Virgil Crest Ultras, which is kind of a cult classic that I was just tired and I had to put to bed a few years ago. But I think the COVID year, and I could only hear so many people asking to bring it back, but just kind of increase the sentimentality of, I don't know, just going back to that and the community feel and just let's get back to some semblance of what we used to be or whatever. So, but I'm hoping to put that on and on September 18th. So I think that I was thinking I might be kind of cooked after that weekend, but I will plug it on the trails. I know.
I don't know you that well, but I think you can do it. You seem like you got it.
We can do a 10K option. There's even a walk option. You can just come from.
Yeah, that's I don't walk now.
Pressure's on, Ian. Pressure's on.
It is. Yeah, it is.
We'll get you an elite bib. We'll find a place for you to stay.
Do we have a deal for New Yorkers where if you bring 6, you get your bib for free? Is that the deal we have going?
There is a team. Well, there is a team deal. Yes.
Right.
There is a team deal. So.
Oh, that's good. Well, maybe I'll come up if I'm cooked. I'll by accidentally just sleep through the start, and then I'll just hang out with Noah, kind of whatever he's doing.
He's got a big house. You can stay with him. I'll come over. We'll use his kitchen while he's gone, and we'll have the bottom of the race when it's all over. Yeah,
that's outstanding. Yeah, and then I can go just hang out at the end, which is kind of fun. So I will definitely check it out. I will plug it also on the Trails Collective. You are always welcome if you have the time, interest, energy, which I know you're probably all strung pretty thin to get me any media, and I can weave it into the Trails Collective weekly rundowns or whatever as well. But thanks so much for all doing what you're doing. I know it means a ton to the trail and running communities out there, and on top of just doing it for its own sake, for the work that you're doing through all your land trusts and entities and all that. So thank you for all that work. Thank you for carving time out of your nights tonight. And I am looking forward to seeing you all in person on the ground in Maine at some point here.
Great. Thank you so much, Ian, for having us on.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I really appreciate it. Yeah.
All right.
Thanks, Ian.
Okay.
All right.
Take care. Bye-bye.
See you guys.
Take care.